Okay, hello and welcome back to the channel. This week we're going to be looking at a video which I have recently shot. A few of us went out on Halloween. Got to give some credit to a lad called Aaron who organised this. So there's a small group of us who kind of live on the Wirral and in Liverpool that all kind of get together occasionally and take some photos and, you know, do sort of interesting things with video and photography. So just before Halloween and just before we went back into lockdown, 5 of us went over to Liverpool and shot some cool Halloween style photography things. So what I did, as well as taking my camera and doing some photography and getting some really nice images, I sort of took a behind the scenes / sort of fashion photography style video as well. Now this was a really good experience for me, as some of it was stuff that I'd not really shot before. I was playing around with things like super slow motion, going up to 100 frames. We had some steel walls, we had some smoke grenades, so very colourful, lots going on. And overall this was just a really sort of fun video for me to kind of, you know, get my teeth into and work out how to film. So this video is going to be in 2 halves. It's going to be half showcase where I just kind of show this work and let you all see it. And then the second half is going to be a quick tutorial where I look at sort of some of the settings that I used, some of the ways in which I was able to film and capture this event. So let's get straight into it. Here is the 2.5 minute-ish of footage I got from our Halloween photography event. Okay, so I hope you enjoyed that. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to speak about some of the aspects that made up this video, some of the things that went into the shooting and some of the things that went into the editing. So let's start on the camera. Now, one of the main things I did on this video, which allowed me to shoot it this way and kind of get the footage that you've just seen, is to shoot in a high frame rate. If you're new to video or film and you don't know, frame rate is literally how many frames, how many single frames there are in a second of video. So if we look at a movie, the most standard frame rate is 24 frames a second. If you look at TVs, things like a soap, and especially TV in America, you might be looking at 30 frames a second. These frame rates give you a very natural and filmic look, which you're really used to seeing on TV. Now, if you want to shoot in slow motion, what we have to do is raise the frame rate so we can then slow it back down in post. If I take a 24 frames a second video and try and slow it down, what's going to happen is it's going to go jittery. And you do see this occasionally used for effect in film and TV, but when you're trying to make polished video, it's not really the way to go. So what you have to do is raise your frame rate. So if you work off the basis that my camera is, for the most part, running at 25 frames a second, which is a pretty standard video film-like look, If I want to go to slow motion, the quickest and easiest way to do it is to raise the frame rate to 50 frames a second. This means that the camera is recording double the amount of frames in a second than it does normally. Now what this actually ends up meaning in post is that if I slow the video down by 50%, because of the extra frame in between each frame from before, it's still very smooth when you play it back, even though it's now half the speed. And this equation works up as far as you can go. My camera, for example, lets me film at 100 frames a second, so then this is 4 times the amount of frames that I'm normally capturing, which then allows me to slow it down to 25% rather than 50, and it goes even slower. Now, some cameras will let you film even higher. They'll let you go up to, some of these crazy cameras film at 1,000 frames a second, but most consumer cameras, you'll probably max out about 100 frames. Now, 2 quick notes on frame rate that are going to let you do this. 1, as a general rule of thumb, whatever your frame rate is, you need to double that for your shutter speed. If your camera uses shutter angle, it's a little different, but if it is using shutter speed, have it be double your frame rate and you pretty much won't go wrong. Now, this is done to avoid things like distracting motion blur or a lack of motion blur, and it just kind of is a good rule of thumb to keep your image looking fairly clean. Other YouTube channels like Gerald Undone have recently done videos on this where they test this theory and they kind of dig into how it really works, but it gets super technical, so I'm not going to talk about that too much today. So if I'm at 50 frames a second, I'm going to have my shutter speed at 100. If I'm at 100 frames a second, it's going to be at 200. Now, if you know anything about cameras, you're going to be realizing here that this is going to mean a lack of light. And this is definitely an issue I face on this kind of shoot where I'm filming at night. If I go up to 100 frames a second and I'm at 200 shutter, I'm letting in about 4 times less light than I would be if I was filming at a normal frame rate. This means my image is getting darker and darker, and I'm going to have to find other ways to brighten it up. Now, seeing as I'm shooting on a Sony a7S II, this is not really a massive issue for me, as this camera is the absolute low light beast. So if I push my ISO up to things like 4,000, 5,000, even 10,000, I'm still getting a very clean, usable image. But on other cameras, that's not going to be the case. If you're shooting on a Blackmagic and you go up to 50 frames, 100 frames, if they can even do that, you're going to really struggle with your ISO, as soon as you go past that kind of base ISO, you're going to introduce a lot of grain and noise into your image. So camera dependent, this is something that might be an issue. But at the end of the day, if you know this ahead of time, all you need to do is bring more light. Another issue I face when I film at high frame rates is motion jitter and the way I'm holding the camera. Now again, on my camera, if I hold it handheld, it's got some in-camera stabilization. So if I'm holding it handheld just like this, at normal frame rate, it's going to look okay. I can pretty much have that be usable. But as the frame rate goes up, you introduce more and more movement into your image, and things like micro jitter can become a real issue. What I'm going to do here is insert a clip at 100 frames without slowing it down, and you'll see just how much the camera is shaking and moving around. Now the beauty of this is if I know I'm going to slow that footage down, whether it's 50% or to 25% and make it really slow, I know the video is going to end up being fine, as once you slow it down that much, the micro jitter goes away. But you do need to bear this in mind, because if you ever decide to use that footage at a normal frame rate and not slow it down, you may really see problems in your image. Now, one way I've always gotten around this in the past when I've been filming on promotional work is to use a gimbal, as this takes out all that micro jitter and essentially means whatever frame rate you're shooting at, this kind of thing is not really an issue. But there is a very specific look to a gimbal, as we've discussed in the past, and I didn't want it for this shoot, so I left it at home. So what I ended up using was this, a shoulder rig. Now, this shoulder rig allows me to kind of have the camera on here and have a really nice stable base, so the camera will go on this bit here and I can move around like this. Because of the extra weight that the shoulder rig's giving, and of course just the way I'm holding it up here and not in my arms, this makes it a lot more stable and a lot easier to use. Now, it's not perfect and my camera is very light, so this is still quite a light setup and you definitely can still get a bit of jitter, but these are dead cheap. I got this one for about 50 quid on Amazon, and this is a really good solution if you just want a bit more camera stabilization but you don't want to go onto a gimbal. Now, in terms of lighting on this shoot, I didn't have too much of an issue, as we shot in Liverpool and we knew in the city centre there'd be lots of lights everywhere and we wouldn't really have too much of a problem. I did take a small LED light, which I can't show you because it's over there, and if I really needed to, I could have taken my softbox, the main light I'm using over there, which I actually did on a shoot the other night. This is really, really bright and can be used on battery power, so this is a great solution if you need light in an outdoor space. If I show you again some of the steel wall shots, I knew that light was not going to be an issue here, as the main focus of these shots is actually the steel wall itself. And as this is a light, I knew brightness would not be an issue. In fact, the issue was actually exposing for that correctly, as if I expose for the ground before they started doing it, it ends up being way too bright and blows out. And I wanted the detail to be in the steel wool and not necessarily in the background. So again, like everything, a lot of this is just planning and kind of working on what you need to do ahead of time. So if I quickly jump into the edit, the really simple thing I'm doing here, which I've already explained slightly, is just affecting the speed of these clips, which I'll show you now. So if I right click on this clip and just go to speed/duration, I can slow this down as much or as little as I want. Now, as I mentioned before, the speed in which I'm slowing it down does need to be relative to the frame rate in which I've shot it and the sort of ratio that ends up being. So if I filmed at 50 frames a second and I'm trying to normalize it back to a normal speed, it needs to go to 50%, which ends up being back at 25 frames a second. There's a risk if this gets really technical, so I'm not going to go into it too much. And I know other softwares allow you to actually just tell it what frame rate you want it to be played at, but if my clip is 4 times faster, I need to slow it down by 25% to get back to 100%. As you want the clip to play at normal speed, it's just that the clip was recorded faster and therefore I'm slowing it down. There's a million resources online that explain that a lot better than I did, so dive into them if you really want to understand the actual theory behind slow motion. As you can see, I'm slowing a lot of these clips down, I'm moving them around, I'm making sure they all fit, and I'm getting the right bits. One of the things you can do here is speed ramp, which I'll quickly show you. So if I drag this down and open this up, we can then add a keyframe to this point, right click on this, go and set it to speed, and then we can keyframe this and change the speed and then adjust this slider, and we'll get a speed ramp. So now you get the full speed or the half speed, and it kind of ramps up or down to the next speed you want to do. This is a really cool effect, and you see it a lot on YouTube as it's very popular. A much quicker way of doing it, if you're not too fussed about the speed ramp itself, is just to cut the clip in half, as you can see here. Make sure the first part of the clip is set at the normal speed, and then slow down the second part. Here you get a speed ramp without the gradual nature, so it's not quite as polished, but it essentially does the same job. Beyond that, the only real thing I've done with this edit is to kind of assemble it in a certain way. So for me, knowing that I was videoing an event, I like to kind of keep this in order. This of course makes it slightly easier to edit and assemble, but also for me, it keeps a nice kind of storyline through as you're seeing the events of the night as they progressed. Admittedly, if you weren't there or you weren't a part of this shoot, then that storyline kind of doesn't exist. So you could easily move these clips around, but for me, that was just the easiest way of editing it. The only other thing that I spent any time on in this video is sound effects. So I knew I wasn't going to be using any of the audio from these clips, so I didn't even bother recording audio at the time. I think I had the in-camera microphone on, but it was not recording at any good quality or ever to be used. This was because I knew going in that I would be adding music and probably adding sound effects. So if I mute all these sound effect tracks and just play this with the music, to me, it feels like there's something missing. It still feels a little bit empty. As a rule of thumb for me, if there's something in your video clip which is clearly making a noise, you need to either have that sound recorded or add that sound back in. It's very strange as a viewer if you see something that you know should be making a noise. For example, like if a car drives past and there's no noise attached to it, it feels very strange and disconnected. So with these steel wall spinners and with the smoke grenades to a degree, I thought the one thing I really need to do is to add some realism back in was to add some sound effects. So seeing as I'm subscribed to Epidemic Sound, I went straight to their website, go to the sound effects tab and just type in the things I need: firework, crackle, smoke grenade, etc, and just kind of start dragging these clips back in. Now, you may need to spend some time on sound effects, as if you do this wrong, it can be really over the top and it doesn't help at all. But if you bring them all down, mix them properly so they feel like they sit in the track, they're not too high up and they're not kind of in the way, you can add a lot just by adding these sound effects in. So once I've assembled it, once I've made all the slow motion, once I've done everything I want with it, for color grade, I'm not going to go into that because, to be honest with you, I mainly used a LUT and then just did some slight corrections. I have a whole bank of color LUTs saved up now, and seeing as I'm partially colorblind, color grading is not something that I spend a ton of time on anyway. So once I found the LUT that gave me the right sort of moody, atmospheric vibe, I just checked for each clip, made sure that they were all at the right level, all at the right exposure, none of them kind of had any really weird color hues or tints to them, and then left it at that. As I discussed last week, I've added in a PNG of some cinema bars, but then I've cheated, I've gone in and made them slightly smaller. As I didn't want to cut out too much of the image, I just wanted to give it a bit of a nicer feel. Once I finished off with that whole process, it's now time to export. So I go to File, Export, and then I'm going to export this at the YouTube preset for 2K. 1440p. Now I only shot this in 1080p, so this might seem really weird, but this is a top trick I've been teaching people recently, and it's something I've seen on YouTube for a while now, and it definitely works. YouTube compresses the hell out of all video files and really restricts any sort of bitrate that you try and upload to their servers. So I could upload a 20 gig file that had a really high bitrate if I recorded it on my monitor, and it could be really high quality, but YouTube is going to compress it and ruin the image anyway. Now someone on YouTube, I don't know who to credit, found a really cool way of getting around this to a degree, which is to export in 2K. So even though the video is only 1080, and theoretically I'm stretching it to make it bigger, because YouTube sees this file as 2K or even 4K if you do it that way, it's going to allocate more bitrate to my video and allow it to stream at a much higher quality. Now I've tested this myself with multiple videos, and it is definitely true. I've uploaded the same file 1080p or 2K, even though both original files are only in 1080p, and the 2K one looks noticeably better. So there's a top trick for you. If you want to make something look better on YouTube, upload it in 2K, even if it's not. So I think that's about it for today, guys. I've talked you through the process of kind of how I filmed this video, how I did some editing in this video, and I've shown you how to upload it in a slightly higher quality. I hope this was helpful for you, and I hope you've learned some little tips and tricks on how to edit in this way. Like most people in this country, my life has come to a bit of a standstill again as we enter the second lockdown, so I'm going to have a lot more time, and I'm going to try and film a lot more videos over the next month. Hopefully some of you can share this round, hit the like, subscribe, all that stuff that really helps you kind of try and grow this channel. And I hope to see you back next time where we talk about another thing, film or video related. See you soon.